I wasn't supposed to be at the gym that day. My plan was simple: grab some coffee, take a short walk, and wait for Melissa to finish her training session like any other Thursday. But something made me change course. Maybe it was a nagging feeling that had been building up over the past few weeks. Or maybe it was just curiosity. Either way, I found myself walking into the lobby of her gym, pretending like I had just randomly decided to pick her up early. The receptionist barely glanced up as I sat down on one of those stiff leather chairs by the window. I could see the studio doors through the glass panel, and the faint hum of treadmills and weights filled the air. Melissa's session wasn't supposed to end for another 20 minutes, so I settled in, mindlessly scrolling through my phone to kill time. That's when I heard them, two women, not far from where I was sitting, chatting like they didn't have a care in the world. I wasn't paying attention at first, their voices were just part of the background noise. But then a familiar name made me freeze. I swear, Shishoen's totally into her. You can tell. The way he looks at her. It's so obvious, one of them said, her tone casual but loaded with meaning. I shifted in my seat, and my ears suddenly tuned into their conversation. You mean Melissa, right? The other asked, sounding just as intrigued. Yeah, have you seen them together? It's not just professional anymore. She's not against it either. They've got this chemistry, you know? My heart skipped a beat. I stared at my phone screen. But the words blurred. Shishoen, Melissa's trainer. I'd met him once or twice. He was your typical fitness instructor, young, confident, a little too smooth for my liking. But I never thought. I mean, it's a gym, right? She's there to work out, to focus on herself. How could I have missed it? The women kept talking, but their words turned into a dull roar in my ears. My chest tightened as the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Melissa, my wife, wasn't just working out with Shishoen. There was something more happening, something that went beyond training sessions and fitness goals. I didn't move, didn't say anything. My hands gripped the phone tighter, but I kept staring at it, pretending I hadn't just overheard a conversation that could shatter my world. What do you do in a moment like that? Burst in, demand answers? Cause a scene? No, I wasn't going to let this be the way I found out. I needed more than overheard gossip. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So, I waited. For a moment, I hoped I'd misheard. Maybe they weren't talking about my Melissa. I mean, it's a common enough name, right? Maybe there was another Melissa in the gym, another woman who'd caught Shishoen's eye. But the hope was fleeting, like a weak flicker of light before it was snuffed out by the darkness. Deep down, I knew. There was no other Melissa. They were talking about her. My wife. My heart started pounding, each beat louder than the last, echoing in my ears like a relentless drum. I could barely breathe. My chest tightened like someone had wrapped their hands around my ribcage and was squeezing harder and harder. The room suddenly felt smaller, suffocating. I could still hear those girls talking, their voices casual, almost careless, but I wasn't listening anymore. My mind raced, spinning out of control. How could this happen? Was it happening? The Melissa I knew, my Melissa, wouldn't do something like this, right? Like any couple, we had our rough patches. But we were solid. At least, that's what I thought. But now, every memory, every conversation, every shared moment seemed tainted, like I'd been living in some kind of lie. I couldn't stop thinking about Shishoen, his easy smile, the way he seemed so comfortable around her like they shared some inside joke I wasn't part of. Had it always been there, right in front of me, and I just hadn't noticed? Or had I chosen not to notice? That question gnawed at me, tearing at my insides. Was I the fool who'd been blind to it all? My pulse quickened even more. My mind kept flashing images of them together, her laughing at his jokes, him leaning in a little too close, that spark in her eyes that used to be just for me. I didn't want to believe it, but the more I thought about it, the more it all started to make sense. The late nights at the gym, the sudden interest in extra sessions, how she always came home glowing, like something more than just a workout had given her that rush. And now? Now, I was here, sitting in a gym lobby, holding my phone like a lifeline, while my whole world came crashing down around me. My hands were trembling, and I could feel the sweat slick on my palms. I didn't know what to do. Confront her? Walk away? Scream? Cry? I tried to slow my breathing, tried to think rationally, but my thoughts kept spinning like they were trapped in a whirlwind. Could it be true? Could she be doing this to me? To us? How long had it been going on? And more importantly, why? The more I tried to make sense of it, the less it made sense. But one thing was clear, nothing was ever going to be the same again. Leaving would have been the easy choice. I could have stood up, walked out, and pretended none of this was happening. Pretended I didn't just overhear that gut-wrenching conversation about my wife and her trainer. But something in me refused to run. Maybe it was the need for proof, for something concrete. If this was real, I needed to see it with my own eyes. So, I stayed. I slid further back into the chair, trying to make myself invisible in the corner of the gym's lobby. My heart was still racing, my thoughts a tangled mess, but I forced myself to focus. I'd wait until Lisa finished her session. I had to see how she acted with Shishoen and had to know if what those girls said was true or just baseless gossip. Maybe, just maybe, it was all a misunderstanding. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself to stay sane. Time crawled by, each second stretching longer than it should. I could feel the tension building inside me. Every muscle in my body wound tight, like I was preparing for a blow that I knew was coming but couldn't predict. The noise of the gym, clanging weights, the hum of treadmills, became a dull backdrop to the storm in my head. And then, through the glass doors, I saw her. Lisa stepped out of the studio, still in her workout clothes, her hair tied back in that effortless way that always made her look more beautiful. But today, I couldn't admire her like I used to. Instead, I watched. Every detail suddenly loaded with suspicion. She was smiling, laughing even, as she walked alongside Shishoen. He was right next to her, close, too close. The easy familiarity between them made my stomach churn. She looked relaxed and happy. Happier than I'd seen her in a while if I was being honest. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something there, something more than just a professional relationship between trainer and client. I kept my eyes on them, trying to dissect every interaction. Shishoen leaned in to say something. His body language was casual but intimate. Lisa responded with a laugh, her hand brushing against his arm, just for a second. A small gesture, something that might have gone unnoticed on any other day, but now it screamed at me. It felt like I was watching someone I didn't recognize. I gripped the arms of the chair, fighting the urge to march over and confront them right then and there. But I held back. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed more than just a laugh or a glance or a touch. I needed to know for sure before I acted. So I watched, my chest tightening with every smile, every look, every tiny piece of evidence that pointed to the truth I didn't want to face. When they finally parted ways, Lisa didn't look back at him. She headed for the locker room, her face still lit with that smile. Shishoen lingered for a moment, watching her go before turning back toward the gym floor. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I caught it, the look on his face, that lingering gaze. It wasn't professional. It wasn't casual. It was something more, and that was all I needed. I sat there, paralyzed by what I'd just seen. Every instinct in me screamed to act, to confront them both, right there, in the middle of the gym. I could feel the anger rising, a hot, suffocating wave that threatened to spill over. My fists clenched involuntarily, knuckles turning white. I could picture it so clearly, storming over to Lisa and Shishoen, demanding answers, tearing into them in front of everyone. I wanted to shout, to ask her how she could do this, how she could betray everything we'd built. But I didn't move. The urge to unleash that fury was overwhelming. My pulse pounded in my temples, and it took every ounce of self-control to stay rooted in that stiff leather chair. I knew that causing a scene wouldn't give me what I wanted. There'd be yelling, sure. Tears, maybe. But it wouldn't solve anything. It would just be chaos, public, messy, humiliating chaos. And after that, what? I'd still be left with the same questions. And the same pain, but now it would be out in the open, with strangers gawking at our dirty laundry. No, I couldn't do that. Not here. Not like this. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to think rationally, to push the anger down, though it burned hot inside me. What would a confrontation achieve? Maybe I'd get the truth, or maybe she'd lie, deny everything, and turn the situation around on me. I'd seen it happen with other couples, accusations flying, but no real resolution. Just more damage. I wasn't going to give Lisa that chance, to make me look like the crazy, jealous husband. I needed control, and losing it now would put me at a disadvantage. I stared at the glass doors. The image of her smiling at Shishoen still burned into my mind. I felt sick, but I was better than this. Smarter. If there was one thing I knew, it was that emotions, especially anger, were dangerous when unchecked. If I let myself erupt here, I'd never be able to take it back. Instead, I swallowed it down. Every bit of rage, every painful question bubbling up inside me, I shoved it into the back of my mind and locked it away. I couldn't afford to be reckless. There had to be another way, a smarter way to deal with this. I straightened up in the chair, taking another long, slow breath to steady myself. I was shaking with the effort it took to stay calm, but the decision was made. I wasn't going to explode, not yet. I needed time. Time to think. Time to plan. And I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As I sat there, forcing the storm inside me to settle, a different kind of clarity began to form. The anger, still hot, started to change shape, turning into something colder, more calculated. I couldn't just let this go. I wasn't the kind of man to swallow betrayal and move on. No. If Melissa and Shishoen thought they could play me for a fool, they were wrong. Revenge. The word echoed in my mind, sharp and dark. But not the kind that comes with yelling. Tears and broken furniture, that wasn't my style. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. No, I needed something deeper, something that would hit them where it hurt the most. I wanted to take control of this situation, turn it against them, and make them pay without ever knowing who pulled the strings. The more I thought about it, the more the plan began to take shape. I wouldn't confront them. That would be too simple, too direct. Melissa and Shishoen had already crossed a line, and I wasn't about to give them a chance to play the victim or manipulate the narrative. I needed to be smarter and more careful. I needed to hit them both where they didn't expect it. Shishoen was the key. He wasn't just some random guy. He worked here, in this gym, and had built a reputation. He was young, charismatic, the golden boy of the place. Everyone loved him, trusted him, and handed him their health and fitness goals on a silver platter. And that was exactly where I could strike. If I could make it look like Shishoen had violated the professional boundaries expected of him, like he had crossed the line with a client, it would ruin him. All it would take was the right rumor in the right ear, and his career here would be over. I'd seen it before. Accusations, even when unproven, could destroy someone in the fitness industry. All I had to do was plant the seed. Just enough doubt, just enough to make people wonder. And the best part? It wouldn't be traced back to me. It would look like it came from someone within the gym, someone who had seen Shishoen's behavior firsthand. As for Melissa, well, once Shishoen's reputation started to crumble, she wouldn't be far behind. She'd lose her status at the gym, her perfect little setup, her social circle. She'd feel the weight of isolation when everyone started whispering about her and Shishoen. She'd lose her comfort, her place of escape, the very thing she'd used to betray me. I could already picture it, Melissa trying to understand why her world was falling apart. Why people were treating her differently, while Shishoen struggled to salvage his career. And through it all, I'd be there, watching them unravel, never letting on that it was me who had pulled the strings. Yes, this was it. Not a burst of rage, not a messy confrontation. A slow, calculated unraveling of their lives. And it started today. By the time I left the gym that day, the plan had fully formed in my mind. I felt calmer and more in control than I had in the hours before. The pain of Melissa's betrayal was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but now it had direction. Revenge wasn't just an impulse anymore, it was a mission. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, my laptop open in front of me, staring at the blank email screen. I wasn't going to rush this. The key to a successful revenge is precision. If I was going to take Shishoen down, I had to make it look legitimate, believable, and most importantly, anonymous. I leaned back, considering my words carefully. The accusation couldn't be too over the top, or it might be dismissed as jealousy or a baseless rumor. No, it had to strike the perfect balance. Something subtle but serious enough to raise alarms. I knew how this worked. People in power often acted quickly to avoid a scandal, especially in a place like this gym, where reputation and trust were everything. I started typing, letting the words flow slowly at first. To whom it may concern. I'm writing to bring to your attention a serious concern regarding one of your trainers, Shishoen, last name. Over the past few months, I have observed behavior that crosses professional boundaries and may violate the ethical standards expected from your staff. Specifically, it has come to my attention that Shishoen has developed an inappropriate relationship with one of his clients, Melissa, last name, which raises questions about his conduct with other clients as well. While I cannot speak to the full extent of their relationship, it is clear that their interactions go beyond what is considered appropriate between a trainer and a client. This behavior has not only been noticed by other gym members but has started to create discomfort among those who frequent the gym. I believe this could harm the gym's reputation if left unaddressed. I hope you will take this matter seriously and investigate it further. As a concerned member of the community, I felt it was my responsibility to bring this to your attention before the situation escalates further. Sincerely, a concerned member. I read it over several times, making sure the tone was just right. It didn't directly accuse Shishoen of anything too specific, but it planted enough doubt. Enough to make the management question him. Enough to make them wonder if there was more going on behind the scenes. I kept the names vague. If I made it too personal, it could raise suspicion. The goal was to put the spotlight on Shishoen's behavior, to make it seem like others had noticed that it was already becoming a problem. If they believed even half of what I wrote, they'd have no choice but to act. Satisfied, I opened a new email, created an anonymous account, and copied the letter into the body. I entered the gym's contact email and hit send. It was done. A strange sense of satisfaction washed over me as I closed the laptop. I knew this was just the beginning, but the wheels were in motion. Soon, Shishoen's perfect little world would start to crumble, and Melissa would feel the ripple effect. They thought they were untouchable, but now I was the one pulling the strings, and neither of them had any idea what was coming. All I had to do now was wait. It didn't take long for the ripples to start. Less than a week after I sent the email, the gym initiated an internal investigation. I had been keeping close tabs, checking for signs that my letter had reached its intended target. And then it happened. Shishoen was temporarily suspended. I found out through the grapevine, overheard whispers in the lobby, passing comments between staff members. Some kind of investigation, they said. Ethics violation. The exact words I'd used in my letter. I couldn't help the surge of satisfaction that coursed through me. It was working. The first time I saw Shishoen after his suspension, he was still coming to the gym, but he wasn't training anyone. Instead, he moved through the space like a ghost, hovering on the edges of conversations, no longer the confident center of attention. He didn't joke with the clients or staff like he used to. His usual charm had been replaced by a heavy, anxious silence. There was a slump in his posture, a stiffness in the way he moved, like he knew people were watching him, judging him, even if they didn't say anything. I'd positioned myself perfectly in the lobby that day, pretending to scroll through my phone while keeping a close eye on him. It was a strange feeling, seeing him, this man who had once seemed so untouchable, now vulnerable, on the edge of losing everything. I watched as he tried to act normal, but the strain was obvious. Every smile he forced looked painful. Every conversation was brief and awkward, like he was trying to avoid any unnecessary attention. The gym was different now too. People weren't flocking to him for advice or lingering after sessions to chat like before. His clients had been reassigned to other trainers during the investigation, and though no one said it aloud, I could sense the shift. His reputation, once untarnished, was now under scrutiny. People didn't know the full story, but they knew enough to be wary. I overheard a few members talking by the water cooler one day. "Did you hear about Shishoen? Something about inappropriate behavior with a client." "Yeah, I think it's serious. They wouldn't suspend him otherwise. That's a shame. He was one of the best trainers here." I almost laughed at the irony. Was one of the best. Past tense. It was already happening. His image was crumbling, just as I had planned. The gym management wouldn't take chances. Even if they couldn't prove everything, the doubt was already enough to stain him. And once trust is broken in this kind of place, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. As the days passed, I noticed Shishoen's confidence unravel further. He began showing up less, sometimes not at all. When he did appear, he looked tired and distracted, as though the weight of the accusations was grinding him down. The gym had been his kingdom, a place where he thrived, but now it felt like a cage closing in on him. I took in every moment of it, quietly watching from the sidelines as his world started to collapse. And the best part? He had no idea it was me pulling the strings. To him, it must have seemed like bad luck. A misunderstanding, something he could smooth over. But I knew better. This was precision. This was my revenge taking root. Shishoen's downfall was just beginning, and Melissa, well, her time was coming. But for now, I let myself enjoy the sight of him stumbling, his career on the brink of ruin. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about power. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was the one holding all the cards. It wasn't long before the consequences of Shishoen's suspension started trickling down to Lisa. I had been waiting for this moment, knowing that eventually, she'd start to feel the fallout. And when it came, it was almost too easy to spot. At first, it was subtle. She seemed more on edge, less sure of herself. When she came home from the gym, there was a nervous energy about her, like she couldn't quite understand why things were shifting beneath her feet. I'd listen as she talked about her workouts, how her regular sessions with Shishoen had been postponed or rescheduled. The excuses were flimsy, and she knew it, though she wasn't ready to admit that something was seriously wrong. Then, the cancellations became more frequent. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, Lisa mentioned how Shishoen had suddenly taken a break from training. "I don't get it," she said, frowning at her plate. "He's never done this before. They won't even tell me when he's coming back." I could almost feel her frustration bubbling beneath the surface. She was used to being in control at the gym, to having everything go her way, her favorite trainer, her personalized schedule, her little VIP status. But that was starting to unravel now. She was losing the very thing she had taken for granted, and she couldn't understand why. I pretended to be supportive, nodding at the right moments, offering neutral comments like, "Maybe he just needs some time off," or, "I'm sure it's nothing." But inside, I was savoring every second. Soon after, I started noticing the small changes at the gym when I dropped her off or picked her up. The way the staff greeted her wasn't quite as warm as it used to be. It was subtle, less eye contact, a slight delay in their smiles, like they were holding something back. She didn't seem to pick up on it at first, but I could see it happening. Her status there, the little bubble she had crafted around herself, was starting to deflate. Then came the day when she finally realized something was wrong. She had tried to use one of the gym's premium services, something she had always taken full advantage of, a perk that only the most loyal members received, and they denied her. I could tell the moment she got home that something had shifted. She stormed into the house, her face flushed with confusion and anger. "They told me I don't have access to the VIP lounge anymore," she exclaimed, throwing her gym bag onto the couch. "Can you believe that? After all this time? They said I'd have to renew my membership for extra privileges. But I just renewed." I leaned against the counter, feigning surprise. "That's strange. Maybe there's been a mistake." But I knew there was no mistake. It was all part of the same chain reaction. Shishoen's suspension wasn't just his problem, it was Lisa's too. The club staff was keeping their distance, unsure how much of the scandal involved her. The whispers were starting, and her once solid standing in the gym community was eroding. She was losing the respect she had so easily commanded before. Days turned into weeks, and the coldness became undeniable. The other clients began to notice her, but not in the way she was used to. No more friendly conversations by the water cooler. No more glances of admiration or envy. Now, there were only sideways looks, and murmured comments behind her back. People were talking, and though she couldn't prove it, she knew. I watched as she tried to regain her footing, as she spoke with the staff, trying to smooth things over, but it wasn't working. The damage had been done. Lisa, once the queen of the gym, was now just another client. Worse, she was one with a cloud of suspicion hanging over her, though she had no idea where it came from. Every day, she came home looking a little more lost, a little more unsure of herself. It was clear the isolation was getting to her. Shishoen was no longer there to support her or provide a sense of importance. The friends she thought she had at the gym were distancing themselves. And still, she didn't know why. She couldn't see the strings I'd pulled to make this happen. The best part? I never had to say a word. I could watch it all unfold in silence, pretending to be the supportive husband while inside. I reveled in her confusion and frustration. She thought she had control. She thought she had me fooled. Now she was the one losing everything. It was bound to happen eventually, crossing paths with Shishoen at the gym. Despite his suspension, he still came around from time to time, either to talk with management or perhaps in a desperate attempt to hold on to what was slipping away. I'd been anticipating this moment, but when it finally happened, it was almost too perfect. I was in the lobby, casually sipping coffee, pretending to scroll through my phone, when I saw him walk in. He was dressed in his usual athletic gear, but something was different. The usual confident swagger was gone, replaced by an almost tentative energy, like he wasn't sure of his place anymore. His eyes darted around the room, searching for familiar faces, but none of the staff greeted him with their usual warmth. Instead, they offered brief, uncomfortable nods before quickly turning away, eager to avoid any prolonged interaction. I could see the tension in his body as he moved through the space. He was trying to act like everything was normal, but it wasn't. His career was hanging by a thread, and it showed. He must have spotted me because he made a beeline in my direction. For a split second, I wondered if he knew. If somehow, despite all my careful planning, he'd figured out that I was behind the letter. But then he flashed a strained smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes, and I knew he was still in the dark. "Hey, man," he greeted me, his voice trying to carry its usual confidence but faltering. "Haven't seen you around much." I looked up from my phone, feigning mild surprise. "Oh, hey, Shishoen. Yeah, just been busy, you know how it is." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. The usual easy charisma was gone, replaced by an awkward hesitance. I could see the cracks forming, the way his gaze avoided mine for just a beat too long. He knew something was off, but he didn't know how much I knew, or how much I had done. "How's Melissa?" he asked, a little too casually, as if trying to gauge whether I suspected anything. His concern wasn't for her, it was for himself. "She's good," I replied, keeping my voice steady and neutral. "Just been focusing on her workouts, I guess. Haven't heard much about your sessions though. Something going on?" It was a small poke, subtle enough to seem innocent, but I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. He tried to laugh it off, but it came out hollow. "Yeah, some mix-up with the schedule. Temporary stuff. Should be back soon." He was trying to sound confident, but there was an edge of desperation in his voice. He wasn't convincing anyone, not even himself. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my expression neutral, though inside, I was savoring every moment. Shishoen, this man who had once been so sure of himself, was now visibly unraveling right in front of me. And the best part? He had no idea I was the one who had pushed him to the edge. "Well, good luck with that," I said casually, offering him a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Hope it all works out." He nodded, muttering something about how things would be back to normal soon, but we both knew that wasn't true. As he walked away, I watched him go, feeling the weight of my hidden victory settle over me like a warm blanket. He was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do about it. As things with Shishoen continued to spiral downward, the effects on Melissa became impossible to ignore. She had always been the kind of person who thrived in social circles. Someone who loved to be admired, to be the center of attention. But now, it was as if the world around her was closing in. At first, it was just small things. She stopped going to the gym as often, claiming she was too tired, or not feeling up for it. Then, she stopped going altogether. It was a sharp contrast to the Melissa I'd known. The woman who lived for her fitness routine and her little kingdom of gym friends. Her phone, once constantly buzzing with messages from friends, workout buddies. And her social media followers grew silent. I noticed she stopped checking it as often, the screen lighting up with fewer notifications as the days went by. Her once lively Instagram posts, photos of workouts, smoothies, and perfectly curated moments, faded into nothing. I didn't say anything about it. I didn't need to. I could see the confusion and frustration in her eyes every time she glanced at her phone, hoping for some semblance of the life she had before. But it wasn't just the gym that had changed, it was her entire social world. The whispers had spread, and people were keeping their distance. No one wanted to be caught in the mess that surrounded Shishoen and Melissa, even if they didn't know the full story. At home, Melissa started to withdraw. She would sit for hours in front of the TV, but I could tell she wasn't watching. Sometimes she'd sit on the couch with her laptop open, but the endless scrolling never seemed to lead anywhere. She wasn't engaging with anything, just drifting. She stopped talking about her friends and stopped mentioning plans to meet up. The vibrant, social butterfly I had known was withering away, and the more isolated she became, the more the weight of her choices seemed to press down on her. I watched it all unfold, pretending not to notice. Every time she seemed lost in her thoughts, I'd ask if she was okay, putting on the mask of a concerned husband. She would shrug it off, saying she was just tired, or that she needed a break. But I knew better. The truth was, she was realizing that the world she had once controlled was slipping through her fingers. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. Melissa had no idea that I was behind it all, that every missed invitation, every cold shoulder at the gym, was part of the plan. Her social ties were unraveling, and with them, so was she. The person who had betrayed me was now trapped in her isolation, and I could see the cracks forming. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had sought comfort in someone else, and now she was left with no one. It was only a matter of time before she realized how completely alone she had become. The atmosphere at home had grown thick with tension, and I could feel it mounting day by day. Melissa had started to sense that something was off, not just in her life but between us. I'd seen the way her eyes narrowed when I answered her questions too quickly or how she lingered on my responses, searching for something more. She was piecing together the fragments, and I knew it wouldn't be long before she started connecting the dots. One evening, as we sat in the living room, I could feel the weight of her gaze on me. I was engrossed in a book, but her silence was deafening. Finally, she broke it. "James," she said, her voice steady but edged with uncertainty. "Do you think I've changed?" I looked up, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, the pause stretching between us like a taut wire. "I mean, with everything that's happened. Do you think I'm different?" I feigned confusion, my brow furrowing. "Different how?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. I don't know. I feel like I've lost touch with everyone. It's like no one wants to be around me anymore." I could see the vulnerability in her eyes, and the way she was grappling with the reality of her situation. "You're just going through a rough patch," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Everyone goes through ups and downs." But she wasn't convinced. Her gaze narrowed, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "You're not saying much," she pressed. "It's like you're avoiding the topic." I let out a small laugh, attempting to diffuse the situation. "I'm not avoiding anything, Melissa. I just think we all need time to adjust." But she wasn't satisfied. "James, have you heard anything? About me? About Shishoen? I mean, what do you think?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms casually, a facade of nonchalance. "I don't know, babe. It's all just gossip, right? You can't take it too seriously." The look in her eyes shifted, a flicker of realization sparking within her. "You're acting like you know something." I could feel the tension in the room thicken, the walls closing in. "I don't know anything," I insisted, forcing my tone to stay even. "Why would I?" "Because," she said, her voice rising slightly, "you've been different too. It's like you're hiding something from me." I had to tread carefully. What could I possibly hide? "You're the one who's had the changes." Her frustration was palpable. "You're deflecting, James. I can feel it. Do you think I don't know when you're not being straight with me?" I held her gaze, trying to maintain a calm facade while the internal pressure mounted. "Melissa, I'm here for you. Whatever's going on, we'll work through it together. Just tell me what's bothering you." She shook her head, a mix of anger and despair on her face. "I don't know what's bothering me. But it feels like you know more than you're letting on. And if you do, if you know something about me and Shishoen." My heart raced at the mention of his name. I had to act quickly. "I think you're overthinking this. We've all been stressed lately. Why don't you take a few days to clear your head?" The silence that followed was heavy. I could see the gears turning in her mind, but I had to keep her guessing. The last thing I wanted was for her to uncover my role in her unraveling. "Fine," she said finally, the fight seeming to leave her. "Maybe I am overthinking, but something feels off, James. And I can't shake the feeling that you know more than you're letting on." I managed to keep my expression neutral. But inside, I was on high alert. If she kept digging, she might uncover the truth behind the curtain of my carefully constructed deception. "Just trust me," I replied, hoping to reassure her. "We'll get through this. Just give it time." She nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. I knew I had to remain vigilant. She was starting to suspect something was amiss. As the evening wore on, I could feel the distance between us growing, a chasm of unspoken words and hidden truths. Melissa was starting to question everything, and I had to find a way to keep my secrets safe. As I lay in bed that night, the darkness enveloped me, and my mind spiraled into a whirlwind of thoughts. The thrill of my secret victory surged through me, a powerful rush that I had not anticipated. I had orchestrated Shishoen's downfall, manipulated the situation to my advantage, and in doing so, reclaimed control over my life. For once, I was the one holding the strings, and it felt intoxicating. But amidst that exhilaration, a nagging doubt crept in. I could feel the weight of my actions pressing down on me, and it was hard to ignore the implications. Sure, I had taken revenge, but at what cost? Lissa was slipping away from me, and I was partially to blame. The vibrant woman I had once known was now a shadow of herself, lost and isolated. Each time I saw the flicker of confusion in her eyes, it stabbed at my conscience. I had always thought I could compartmentalize my feelings, that I could separate my sense of justice from the person I loved. But love is a messy thing, and it was becoming increasingly clear that the lines I had drawn were starting to blur. The truth was, I relished the power I had gained. I felt like a puppet master, pulling the strings and watching as Shishouen's world crumbled around him. I had turned the tables and made him feel what I felt: vulnerability, fear, uncertainty. It was a beautiful thing to see someone who once towered over me reduced to a shadow. A mere echo of his former self. I had succeeded where I had once felt so powerless. Yet, that power came with an undeniable price. Every time I caught Lissa's gaze lingering on me, searching for answers I was unwilling to provide, I felt a pang of guilt. I was no longer her haven. I had become a source of confusion and mistrust. The intimacy we once shared was dissolving, replaced by a fragile facade that was slowly cracking. Would we ever return to the way we were? I knew deep down that things could never be the same. The bond we had, once so strong and unbreakable, was now tainted by betrayal, both hers and mine. I had stooped to a level one had never imagined, and it left a bitter taste in my mouth. As the days turned into weeks, I watched her struggle in silence, feeling a strange mixture of triumph and sorrow. I had achieved my revenge, but I was also losing the woman I loved. I thought I could keep my heart shielded, but with every moment that passed, I realized just how deep the wounds had gone. I lay there in the stillness, grappling with the weight of my choices. In my quest for control, I had unleashed chaos. I felt like a king on a crumbling throne, ruling over a kingdom built on lies. Power is seductive, but it's also isolating. I had taken my revenge, but I was paying for it with the very essence of our relationship. Was it worth it? I was left to ponder that question in the dark, knowing that whatever the answer, I would have to live with the consequences of my actions, and so would Lissa.